Okay. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everybody. Welcome to the CSDA Vendor Focused Satellogic NASA Commercial Satellite Data Acquisition Program webinar. This is your host, Jennifer Brennan. It is 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And what I'll do first is begin today's webinar with a few logistics. To ensure the best audio experience, all participants have been placed in silent mode. But if you have any issues or you have any questions, what I'd like for you to do is enter those into the Q&A panel rather than the chat, and you should see this located on the right side of your screen. If you do not see the Q&A panel, you can click on the three dots at the bottom of your screen to pull up your panel options and then insert a check mark next to the Q&A panel option. A quick word about the chat this afternoon. Participants will have the capability to chat with the hosts and presenters, but not with other participants. So again, if you have any questions, we'd like for you to enter those into the Q&A panel on the right side of your screen rather than the chat. Today's webinar is being recorded. The recording will be made available online within a week of completion. And then once completed, what I will do is I'll send an email to all registrants and participants that includes links to both the recording and presentation slide decks used within today's webinar. As far as timing is concerned, today's webinar will be 1 hour and 15 minutes long with 45 to 50 minutes allocated to the presentation, and then a 15-minute Q&A period will follow. And depending on the volume of questions we receive, we may extend the Q&A session, but we will have a hard cutoff, excuse me, of 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay, so during this afternoon's webinar, we have one speaker from NASA's CSDA program and 4 speakers and a Q&A panelist from Satellogic. Our first speaker this afternoon is Dana Ostranga. Dana is the CSDA program's project manager here at Goddard Space Flight Center. She's going to begin this afternoon's webinar with an introduction to NASA's CSDA program and its objectives, and will then provide a high-level overview of the program vendor Satellogic, its IDIQ contract, and data access. Once finished, we will transition to our vendor speakers for this afternoon. Our first speaker is Mark Carmichael. Mark is the VP of Sales, Imagery, and Data at Satellogic and will kick us off with an introduction to Satellogic, its history, and satellite constellation. And then from there, we will transition to our second vendor speaker, Alan Brizik. Alan is the raw imaging team manager at Satellogic. He will provide a comprehensive overview of the NewSat satellite high-resolution multispectral data products available through NASA's CSDA program. After this, we're going to toss it over to our third speaker, Emma Douglas. Emma is the Satellogic's marketing manager, and she is going to speak to the company's learning resources, data delivery, and also begin by introducing some science and applications use cases. Once finished, she will toss it over to our fourth and final speaker, Taylor Struzik. Taylor is the U.S. Government Account Manager at Satellogic, and he'll continue today's presentation with science-based use cases and applications for Satellogic data. And then from there, what I'll do is I'm going to open up the final optional polling questions and then transition directly to the Q&A session. During today's Q&A session, we will be joined by Satellogic engineer Mariela Osabachuali, and she is going to be available to you to address any questions in the Q&A panel as we go through today's content, and then also at the end with the rest of the team. So before I toss it over to Dana, I would like to say just a few words about this afternoon's Q&A session. We will try to answer all questions within the time allotted, but if we are not able to address your question during the Q&A period, our speakers will be able to follow up with you offline. So with that, what I'd like to do now is introduce today's first speaker, Dana Ostranga. And so Dana, with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and I'm going to toss it over to you. All right, Dana, you should have, you should be able to grab the sharing privileges.
Okay, just making sure you can see my first line.
I certainly can. Thanks so much.
Fantastic. So thank you, Jennifer, for kicking us off today, and welcome everybody once again to our CSDA Programs Vendor Focused webinar series, talking today about Satellogic. I'm Dana Ostringa. I am the CSDA project manager, And our program is headed by Melissa Martin, our CSDA program manager at NASA headquarters. So NASA has a strong history with Earth observation data. We acquire, enhance, utilize, and steward that data. And NASA really wanted to explore the possibilities of acquiring and integrating commercial data with our agency partners to support research and application initiatives. So with increasing numbers in commercial Earth observing constellations, leveraging newer technology, providing higher spatial resolution, shorter revisit rates, and tasking capabilities, it really made it ideal to incorporate the commercial data into our ecosystem and augment existing government satellite data. So if you missed any of our previous webinars, just to give you a little bit of background on the CSDA program, it really serves as an essential mechanism at NASA for identifying, evaluating, and acquiring commercial satellite data that supports NASA's Earth science research and application goals. The program has 5 main goals. One is to establish a continuous and repeatable process to on-ramp new commercial data vendors, to enable sustained use of that data for broader dissemination to our scientific community, to ensure long-term data preservation, access, and distribution of that data, ensuring scientific reproducibility, and to collaborate and partner with interagency and international partners on the evaluation and scientific use of that data, and then also to comply with the 2003 U.S. commercial remote sensing policy. If you can go to our CSDA YouTube channel just to see a little bit more about the program and the kickoff webinar for this series. And it talks just a little bit more details about the program as a whole. And then you can also see a list of our other commercial partner webinars to date. This slide really showcases our diverse array of commercial vendors, each providing unique satellite data products to help NASA advance Earth science. We currently have 15 commercial vendors on contract that we can acquire data from. For multispectral imagery, we partner with Vanter, Black Sky, and Satellogic. Planet operates in both the multispectral and hyperspectral domain, alongside Teledyne Brown Engineering and Pixel, who specialize in hyperspectral data. Another one of our vendors, Airbus, operates in both multispectral and the area of synthetic aperture radar, alongside other SAR vendors, which includes MDA, Umbra, ISI, and Capella Space. They all enable all-weather day-night imaging. And for monitoring methane emissions, we go to our provider, GHDSat. For GNSS radio occultation capabilities, they come from Planet IQ and Spire. They also contribute value atmospheric profile. For our digital elevation models, we source from Vanter and Airbus. And for precipitation radar, we utilize data from Tomorrow.io. So together with all these vendors, it really enables NASA to access high-value commercial satellite data across a broad range of Earth science applications. And it enhances our ability to monitor and understand our planet. When NASA evaluates commercial data, it provides confidence not only for our science community, but also for the commercial partners themselves. So just let me highlight some of those benefits. First up, partners gain greater recognition within the science and application communities. Being evaluated by NASA and our interagency partners really signals credibility. Second, it builds trust. So not only with our customers, but also their investors and our partners. It just shows that the data meets rigorous NASA standards. Our commercial partners also gain access to NASA's deep expertise in data quality, which can strengthen their products and practices and even sometimes their capabilities. And finally, NASA evaluations bring greater exposure to the full utility of the data alongside the community of research initiatives from the commercial vendors, ensuring that it's used to its maximum potential. And in short, really, these evaluation processes not only assures that the science community of the data quality that we provide from our commercial partners, it also directly strengthens our commercial partners' credibility, capabilities, and visibility in the marketplace and in the federal space. Since that evaluation process really plays a critical role in our program, I'd like to walk you through the data evaluation criteria that's part of our process when assessing the quality and utility of the data. So first, we look at how easy it is for our researchers to search, discover, and download data from our commercial partner systems. If access is difficult, sometimes it can limit scientific use. We try to work with our commercial partners in developing really easy-to-use APIs and other UI accessibility for our different researchers. Second, we evaluate the completeness of and accuracy of metadata. So good metadata provides the context scientists need to properly interpret and apply the data. Third, we assess vendor support services. So if they're really responsive, they have the availability and the technical expertise, That strong support really helps researchers resolve issues quickly and get that integration into their application or research. And fourth, we consider the usefulness of the data for advancing Earth science. So, does it align with NASA science objectives and does it help fill important gaps? And finally, we evaluate the quality of the data itself. So, things like geolocation accuracy, radiometric accuracy, and calibration using ESA NASA evaluation guidelines. Together, these criteria really help ensure that when NASA brings in commercial data, it's not only high quality, but it's also accessible, well supported, and able to deliver real value to the science community. I mentioned a little bit about the NASA ESA guidelines. So here, I just want to talk a little bit about it quickly. NASA and ESA have partnered in developing the Joint Earth Observation Mission Quality Assessment Framework. At one point in time, both ESA and NASA were working to evaluate and develop guidelines for assessing commercial observing capabilities. So they decided to come together to develop the guidelines jointly so that evaluations can follow the same criteria and grading system that really ensures the confidence in acquisition strategy. ESA had already had an established framework that they were using to assess their commercial and other third-party missions. So we decided to use that as a foundation in developing additional guidelines. NASA and ESA have released joint SAR guidelines, and they're currently working to release the optical guideline, which should come out sometime next month. And also, that is in partnership with USGS. And we are actively working several other guidelines as well. So this will really provide transparency to our commercial partners on the assessment process and methodologies used in those assessments, and also enables the scientific community to understand the evaluation process and easily compare the evaluation outcomes. Coordination of the commercial data purchase within the U.S. government is one of our priorities with other federal agencies. We want to share our evaluation processes and outcomes across the different agencies, and we also want to share data requirements and needs. So all of our new business is uh, currently worked together across federal agencies. We use our current acquisition vehicle, which is everything is on-ramp through an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity process. We also have recently released the CSDA data acquisition request system. So this is a new dashboard that lets authorized users submit and track proposals for data from CSDA's commercial partners. And this includes the ability to request tracking of partner satellite for data that has not yet been acquired by the program. The system is accessible through the Satellite Data Explorer interface. So that brings us a little bit now to the point of talking about the CSDA Satellogic partnership. In September 2024, CSDA awarded Satellogic an IDIQ contract under On-Ramp 1 RFP solicitation. Through this effort, CSDA acquired NewSat orthorectified top-of-atmosphere reflectance products from both satellite generations of Mark 4 and Mark 5. The Mark 4 and Mark 5 were at the time the most recent instruments comprising the constellation of 44 satellites when the evaluation began in early 2025. Our CSDA subject matter experts work to evaluate the data, get a better understanding of Satellogic data products. And the evaluation results were briefed out to headquarters and to the Satellogic team in August last year. The final subject matter expert quality assessment report, it's ready to be released, and actually believe it is available now and is linked to within these slides. You'll be able to see in that evaluation what data was evaluated for sensors in the constellation. The results overall were favorable, and from the assessment showed improvement from the growth of the constellation. One thing of note is that the partnership really has been truly valuable. Satellogic has already made processing improvements with the data, and the team will be reevaluating the imagery and updating the report later this summer. All the data that's been accessed for the evaluation and even through our current acquisitions are downloadable and available through our CSDA Satellite Data Explorer, or SDX, alongside any of the evaluation reports. So if you qualify under one of the EULAs that the data is acquired under, you can register for access on the CSDA website. The Satellite Data Explorer is our interface that provides a central web mechanism for search, discovery, and distribution of CSDA data. This really ensures that it's easier access for researchers and smoother integration with the other NASA data systems. Data that's downloaded will continue to be integrated and available through this interface, and it's also being added to the Earth Data Search client alongside our federally funded mission. So that brings us to the next part of our webinar, to our speakers today to talk to you more about Satellogic. So Mark, I'll stop sharing and then you can take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Dana. I appreciate that. Emma, you are sharing. Okay, great. All right, so hello everyone, and thanks for joining this webinar series here. So I'm going to be introducing Satellogic to the NASA research community as part of the vendor focus series. So pleased to meet you all. So I'm Mark. I'm Vice President of Sales for Imagery and Analytics here at Satellogic, and I've been at Satellogic for 4 years now. But I've been in the industry for 25 years already, mostly focused in SAR and optical and ground systems, among other things. So I'm certainly very excited to see Satellogic's very fast pace of evolution in the market. So today I'm going to give you an overview of who we are and our constellation. We're also going to show a little bit about our roadmap of how our constellation is evolving. And we'll also talk a bit about how Earth science researchers are using our data today and how you guys can engage with us. And then later in the presentation, Alan and Emma and Taylor are going to walk through different aspects of our data access, some image quality analysis, as well as some applications for research that we prepared just to share how people are using our data today. So if you go to the next slide. Okay, great. So at Satellogic, our mission is to democratize Earth observation by making high-res, high-revisit, high-frequency data more affordable and accessible for all. And, this is a really important vision for us. So we want governments and enterprises, so commercial enterprise, research communities, to get better access to timely and meaningful practical data that can solve these everyday analysis challenges that everyone faces in these different communities. Our vision is that we want to create a searchable Earth. We've been talking about that since we started as a company. It's really important that we ultimately want to get to remapping the entire Earth every day. And so you can see, you will see through this presentation that we're well on our way to getting to that goal. The searchable Earth is intended to address our key challenges as a species on this planet. So food security, climate change, managing our energy resources, and also addressing security needs around the world. So we're essentially, Satellogic is working to expand the accessibility to high quality and low latency data access, so that people can solve the more challenging problems that have not been solvable before with other sources of data today. Next slide. Thanks. So Satellogic is the world's first vertically integrated geospatial company that delivers sub-meter resolution imagery at planetary scale. So we're headquartered in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we're publicly traded on the NASDAQ under the SATL ticker. We've been in operation for more than 14 years, and over that time, we've launched 55 plus satellites, all progressively getting more and more sophisticated and delivering higher quality imagery and lower latency services. Mostly it's been driven by our most demanding customers in the realm of security. But all the while, we want to be able to serve the research and civil government enterprise market, where there's a big untapped market in the commercial enterprise world. So looking at our historical timeline, this reflects this steady progress towards our vision of achieving a scaled access to create the searchable Earth that I was talking about a moment ago. We're founded in 2010. Our first satellite launched 3 years later after developing that capability. And then over that time, we launched many more tens of spacecraft, ultimately becoming listed in 2022 on the NASDAQ. And then as of 2026, our constellation is now fully operational, and we're serving many different parts of the U.S. government, Five Eyes community, science, and commercial enterprises around the world. And we're delivering imagery on a daily or better basis from a revisit perspective. So the key message I want to impart here is that Satellogic's core value proposition is we have an incredible amount of space heritage and space maturity, but we also have a differentiated cost efficiency in terms of how we build our spacecraft and the speed at which we can build spacecraft. So we're looking to, so what we can do today is we can build spacecraft in about 3 months, and we can therefore scale up our constellation very quickly. So over the last 12 months, the demand has just been skyrocketing. So very exciting times are ahead. Next slide. All right, so Satellogic has been a member of the CSDA program since 2024. And so we've provided a very large quantity of imagery under the evaluation task order that's available in the Satellite Data Explorer. And Satellogic has also published a large amount of open data on the Hugging Face website. So there's over 6 million images available for download for the public. So there's lots of available data to be used for training of new models, and also exploring through the Satellite Data Explorer. Researchers are using our data across a wide variety of applications like land use change detection, climate-related infrastructure risk monitoring, agriculture and water resource analysis, disaster management. And in fact, we're included on the NASA disaster response task order presently. So users can reach out to the CSDA team and, request tasking of pre and post events, etc. So we're supporting the CSDA team in that way. And so here in these examples here, you can see on the top left is hydropower monitoring. So the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. So you can monitor the activity of whether the dam is spilling water or not, and that has important environmental and political considerations. You can also use our imagery on the top right for monitoring, say, nuclear facilities to watch the progress and the security around those facilities. And on the bottom left, flood mapping in Brazil, and also mine monitoring for reclamation and other sort of performance metrics. So lots of different applications. It shows you the broad sort of spectrum of applications that you can use our data for. So next slide. So that was a quick overview of who Satellogic is. And now I'm going to give you a look into our constellation as we have it today, and also talk about the expanding new announcements, which are super excited. And we'll talk a bit about that next. So next slide. So to date, Satellogic has launched 55 satellites. We've built the constellation around a coordinated operations, and ultimately working towards building this site monitoring constellation, and then getting to daily remaps of the planet. So we feel that to create an effective searchable Earth, you need both and you foundationally need the frequent remapping of the whole planet. So today our fleet is capable of better than daily point target revisit, and also smaller area remaps. And what differentiates Satellogic is our cost efficiency for manufacturing. It enables us to build a big constellation. So you can see 55 satellites, a lot of satellites, and we continue to launch more and more as we go through and expanding our factory, etc. So next slide. So so this is a view into what Satellogic's coordinated constellation looks like. On the left side is site monitoring. So these are satellites that are focused more on point target remapping, like re-imaging and capturing at high frequency. The left-hand satellite called NewSat, that's what our fleet is composed of today. We're constantly evolving that technology, and every time we upgrade the technology, we issue the Mark 1, Mark 2, 3, 4, 5. Just a coincidence that my name is Mark as well. But and then we're working towards a Mark 6 capability. So that gives you an idea of how much we've iterated over time and improved the system. So we'll talk more about that in a second. The next gen is a sort of quantum leap above what the NewSat is. That one is under construction, and will ultimately become the future of the site monitoring constellation, replacing NewSat. And then on the right-hand side, we have the daily broad area monitoring constellation called Merlin. We just announced that on March 18th, so we're very excited about that. First launch is coming up in late this year. So this will be a data resource that you'll be able to get access to starting in early 2027. So very exciting. Next slide. So just a quick overview of what is NewSat. So it's a 50 kilogram small sat. The current fleet is composed of 2 generations. So Mark V, which is the latest, and the Mark IV. Mark V delivers 70 centimeter native, which we super resolution to 50 centimeters when we ortho rectify the product, and has a 6.5 kilometer swath. Mark IV has a slightly lower resolution, so 99 centimeters native, super res to 70, and 5 kilometer swath. So what's interesting about the NewSat design is that we actually have an onboard image stabilization system and use a CMOS style sensor for imaging the Earth. And that allows us to capture all the bands at the same high resolution without the need for pan sharpening. So as a result of that, you actually get better preservation of the spectral quality for each band. Each satellite has a 5-year design life, and we get better than daily revisit at the equator from our fleet. From a tasking performance and delivery performance perspective, we can take orders up to 6 hours before pass, and we can deliver as rapidly as just under 3 hours. And so for that, that is for the L1B geo-corrected product. Okay, next slide. So when we look at the next gen that's in development, we actually announced that, I think it was last summer. So this will be a 30 centimeter super res product, a 45 centimeter native, and 8 kilometer swath. Again, similar style of focal plane, all bands collected at the same high resolution, so no pan sharpening is required. And then, like I said, this eventually will be the future of NewSat. It will replace the NewSat as we transition to launching more and more of these. And then tasking performance is constantly evolving, so it'll be at least as good as the NewSat. And you'll see that you've probably seen some of the other announcements about work we're doing with the U.S. government and others, where we're putting edge compute on board our spacecraft and intersatellite radios and doing more and more real-time tasking, real-time analytics, and real-time delivery of analytic products through intersatellite link. Next slide. Okay, this is the recently announced Merlin global daily remapping system that's going to deliver 1 meter resolution of basically the whole world. And it has 11 bands, so 1 pan band, 10 multispectral bands. All the bands are actually aligned with Sentinel-2 because we wanted to build the biggest possible addressable market of, researchers who use Sentinel today, commercial companies, analytics companies, defense companies. They all use Sentinel as a foundational data set. So aligning with that spectral, regime was really important to us. And then the swath width is 170 kilometers wide. And so you can see that this will be a very powerful tool for remapping whole countries, the whole Earth, and delivering that data rapidly to customers in all walks of life. So defense is going to be really interested. We will have a very low latency product for that. There will also be products tuned to the wallet of different customers around the world. So very much looking forward to that. And you'll keep watching the Satellogic webpage as we get closer to the first launch, because a lot more material will be coming out, and we'll be, sharing sample data and simulated data and a bunch of other aspects of the mission. All right. I think with that, I will hand it over to Alan, who will go through our data products.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. So hello, everyone. My name is Alan Grisek. I'm the head of imagery at Satellogic, and I've been in the company for nearly 10 years now. I'm sitting next to my colleague, Dr. Maria Jose Batrilli, who is the head of the optical payload team. And together we will cover the technical aspects of our offering. So I'll do a quick overview, but feel free to post any questions on the Q&A panel, as Jennifer explained at the beginning, and we'll be happy to answer them on the Q&A section. So Emma, next slide, please. Thanks a lot. So I'll be covering specifically NewSat imagery here, which is offered at different processing levels that are tailored for different use cases. All of these products are delivered as georeference multiband composites representing top of the atmosphere reflectance. Our multispectral imagery features 4 bands, red, green, blue, and near infrared, all of them. You can find the band spectral definition in the table, and the full spectral response functions for each satellite that we launch, measure at the laboratory, are available on our developer side, and there's a link in the table also so that you can take a look at the CSV files for each one of these of our satellites. Each processing level is offered at 16 bits, representing a value from 0% to 100%, which is the reflectance. And that is scaled to a number between 0 and 10,000 to work with integer numbers, which is kind of an industry standard that we've seen. There's also a visual attachment, which is a color-enhanced 8-bit RGB version for visualization purposes. And there are other auxiliary files included for each processing level, like cloud mask, metadata, and some specifics about the calibration done for that processing level. And a thorough explanation of each of them is included in our developers site. And links also, you can find them at the bottom of this table. For each of the processing levels, there's a detailed description on our developer site. So we are here presenting 4 processing levels that are organized by processing time from left to right. So I will get started from the O1 basic, which is the quickest to be delivered, up to the O1 ortho super resolution, the 1 ortho SR to the brightest, which is the one with the most processing involved, and it takes a longer time to be delivered. So the O1 basic is a multiband georeference composite that is processed very quickly, and that's the whole goal for it. It's a quick preview for visual analysis. It is still coarsely geolocated, and it's not orthorectified using a digital elevation model. So the geoaccuracy achieved there is 30 meters compared to other of the processing levels that include a more accurate processing, which attain a 10-meter C90 geolocation accuracy. For the O1 basic, pixels are kept at native resolution. This implies that different captures make up different sampling distances depending on the altitude and the nadir angle of the satellite at capture time. So it's not a fixed GST. Then I'll switch to the ortho-ready processing level. So the next 3 processing levels that I'm going to present are actually executed in chain, one adding one correction on top of the other. The one ortho-ready is a multiband composite that is precisely georeferenced, but it's not orthorectified. It's designed for users who wish to perform their own orthorectification using a digital elevation model of their choice. The datasets, when delivered, do include a rational polynomial coefficients, RPCs, which are also an industry standard, and there are many tools, GIS tools, that are specifically designed to use this asset, the rational polynomial coefficients, that together with the imagery and the DM of selection of the user, each one can generate their own geometrically corrected orthorectified images. Next level is the O1 ortho, which is the orthorectified version of the ortho-ready product. At this stage, we do harmonize the resolution sampling into fixed pixel size that is 99 centimeters for Mark IV and 70 centimeters for Mark V. I think I missed to say that the O1 ortho-ready is still at the native resolution of the capture, so it has a varying resolution, the same as the O1 basic. So the O1 ortho is the first product that has fixed resolution. And the resulting geolocation, as I mentioned before, is 10 meters compared to the 30 meters that we achieved on the O1 basic. Then last, we have the O1 ortho super resolution, which is a one ortho version with increased resolution that we provide using deep learning techniques. It has a fixed 70 centimeters GSD for Mark IV and 50 centimeters for Mark V. I'd also like to take the chance to mention that we are also working on a bottom of the atmosphere reflectance processing level, which is not included here, and I don't think it's part of the scope of the current contract, but you see that it's already on our developer side. So if you're interested in that, you'll find some information about our current development on the surface reflectance product, and we'll keep updating that as we keep developing it. Next slide, please, Emma. Thank you. So I will cover very briefly the calibration and validation framework that we have. We periodically monitor and calibrate our image quality. I'm going to specifically focus here on the radiometric and resolution CalVal, but we also measure other aspects of the image quality like geolocation or SNR. When you get into the developer side, for example, you notice that there are some metadata fields which include our assessment for each tile that is available on what is the measured geolocation, SNR, sharpness, etc. So the radiometric calibration and validation, we hold a 10% absolute radiometric accuracy in all our processing levels. That is something that has been assessed both internally and externally. We've been through the evaluation process that I mentioned at the beginning in the frame of this CSDA contract. And also we have past reports from the USGS evaluation and also the EDAP evaluation report issued by the ESA. So the way we achieve this 10% absolute radiometric accuracy is by three main calibrations procedures. We'll get started actually on the right part of the formula there, which is the measured in lab portion. So the beam conversion from digital numbers into physical units is obtained in a combination of datasheet, data, and lab measurements to ensure the contribution to the radiometric budget is below 10%. Also, each main component, transmissivity, is known with an uncertainty below 5% to have an accurate spectral response function. This accounts for the optical system and also the focal plane. Then on the left part of the formula, we have the in-space special homogeneity calibration, for which we obtain dark and gray frames in orbit to account for any spatial inhomogeneity like detector non-uniformity or vignetting in the optical system. We do that in space to replicate exactly the conditions under which the satellite will be capturing imagery. So that's why we do it in space, providing really good results. And then the third piece of calibration is the vicarious calibration, which is also a pretty standard methodology in the industry. We use RedCamNet, so the invariant sites to calibrate top of the atmosphere reflectance against Sentinel-2. That comparison allows us to both validate periodically that the image is within the 10% accuracy, and also to compensate for any trend by introducing a radiometric correction in the formula for converting from digital numbers to the top of the atmosphere reflectance. All these variables are provided as ancillary information in each of the data assets that are delivered. And the periodic vicarious calibration has provided us with far less than 10% accuracy, which means that the small discrepancies that we might see between Sentinel-2 and our imagery gets periodically corrected, but actually without it, we would still be within that 10%. Then I'll switch to the lower part of this slide, which is the resolution, calibration, and validation. We also execute periodically measurements for each satellite, for each band. We capture the target, as you can see down there, with the Siemens star and the squares, that is 2 calibration target. For the validation part, we validate end-to-end resolution by estimating the full width of maximum of the system's PSF through the slanted edge method. And we also have a quite sophisticated calibration methodology that's what Dana was referring to at the beginning of the meeting, where we made many improvements during the past year to improve our calibration, and that's why re-evaluation process is currently being executed. This calibration procedure starts by defining each individual contributor to the end resolution. Then we measure each contribution individually and make sure that it's within a threshold that matches our sharpness budget. And in case we notice any drift in performance, we calibrate specifically that component, and that's how we make sure that a long time our instruments keep calibrated and provided at our quality standards. But I'm open to questions at the end, so please get them on the Q&A section. Thanks. Emma, thank you, I think.
You are. I see you, Emma.
Yeah, just give me 5 seconds here to switch the screen.
Mark will take over, and then I am going to get us started on how to access our data and different delivery options. There we go. Perfect. So accessing Satellogic data is extremely straightforward. We try to make it as seamless as possible for CSDA users to access their data. So we have 3 different ways in which users can do so to support a range of research and application workflows. So first option is our Aleph platform. It's a web-based environment where users can easily discover, visualize, and work with imagery in our archive. It's designed to make it simple to explore data across locations and over time. For more automated or cloud-based workflows, we support direct delivery through S3 buckets, where captures are made available immediately after processing. This allows users to integrate our data directly into existing pipelines. And then lastly, we offer a REST API for programmatic access. This includes search, tasking, and download capabilities. This supports both scalable and repeatable workflows for scientific use. And most importantly, we're continuing to expand our offering to include analytics-ready data and derived products so that users with large volumes of data can move quickly from imagery to insights. Overall, the goal with our data access methods is to reduce friction and make it as easy and as flexible as possible to integrate this into whatever workflows that users are using for their scientific research. You can go ahead to the next slide. To support these the different types of science-based applications, we've made a range of technical resources available through our documentation center. These resources are designed to make working with our data as seamless as possible, from discovery and access through to analysis and to integration with existing workflows. So what you can find in here is existing API documentation, so guidance on accessing data programmatically, example workflows that support scalable analysis. We also provide platform user guides for navigating our Aleph web UI platform. This includes how to task, search for imagery in our archive, and manage the data effectively. And then most importantly, detailed data specs are available. So we cover everything from sensor characteristics, processing levels, and metadata. This ensures that you, the NASA community, have access to data learning and resources that you need to use the Satellogic data effectively. Go ahead to the next slide.
So next, this section will focus on how satellite data is applied in practice to support specific analysis across real-world use cases. So we'll start with some of the projects that Satellogic has been involved in. We'll highlight disaster response through frameworks like the International Charter. We'll also go ahead and explore different use cases that our data has been used for, including flood monitoring, mining activity in the commercial sector. What's important here is not just access to imagery, but the ability to generate reliable time series data that supports analysis, progressive analysis over time. The examples that follow are intended to illustrate how Satellogic's high resolution and high revisit data can be translated into meaningful insights. So we'll go ahead with our first use case. Mark, if you could skip to the next slide. This slide highlights how some of these principles are applied operationally. We're starting with the International Charter for Space and Major Disasters. The charter provides a coordinated framework for quick access to multi-mission satellite data during disaster events. So this enables a science-based approach to emergency response. On the left, examples from Afghanistan and South Africa illustrate how high-resolution imagery can support damage assessment and infrastructure analysis. These products are derived from systematic observation and comparison, allowing responders and researchers to quantify impacts and prioritize actions. So on the right-hand side here, we can see flood mapping examples demonstrating the extraction and inundation extent from satellite observation imagery. By leveraging consistent observations over time, we can also use this to quantify impact. I think what's important here is how these inputs are not simply just visual representations. They're based on established Earth observation methods that we can use to, demonstrate impact, coordinate emergency response, and serve imagery to a larger purpose. We'll go ahead to the next slide, Mark. So before we get into our next example, I'll start with a flood monitoring. So Satellogic had extensive imagery of the flood that happened in Valencia, Spain in 2024. Before we go into a detailed before and after, this provides more of like a systematic, high-level view of the Valencia flood event. What we can see captured here in the different images, represented in specks across the scale, is the progression of the flood. So from upstream flooding, then you can see through urban areas the impact, and then ultimately the result in the coastal zone. So on the left here, the upstream region shows where the event is initially expressed. You can see the hydraulic response to rain and the terrain. And then as we move towards the center, the focus shifts to the urban impact. So you can see the interaction between floodwaters and built infrastructure and how that translates in terms of exposure and risk. And then finally, we see the downstream coastal interference. So you can see the runoff discharge into the marine environment, carrying sediment and other materials. This type of observation allows us to connect processes across scales. So we can link watershed dynamics, land use, and downstream impacts to a single coherent framework. And what this requires is consistent high-resolution observation over time, which Satellogic provides. The ability to repeatedly image the same area with reliability is what allows us to track the progression of this event and understand how these different components are connected. This sets the stage for the next slide, in which we'll go into a before and after comparison. But this is where we zoom in and examine the processes in more detail. And in this context, more related to CSDA objectives, this kind of multi-scale, temporal, consistent observation directly supports CSDA missions in a variety of use cases. So we'll go ahead to the second slide. So here we move from more of a system level view showing the progression and repeated observation into a more detailed level analysis from a comparison stance before and after. So on the left, we focus on the upstream flood channel along the Ramda de Shiva, where the imagery reveals here the hydraulic structure of the event. So you can see specifically how the channel confluences emerge and how this expands into agriculture areas. The resolution allows us to see the extent of the flood with respect to land use, which is important both for environmental impact assessments and modeling validation. And then here on the right, you can see the downstream expression of the same event at the coastal interface. So here, the river outlet is clearly transporting floodwater into the nearshore environment. You can see by the sediment plume and the contrast in the water color. So this allows researchers to track things like sediment dispersion patterns and can serve as a proxy for flow intensity and transport dynamics. Taken together, these observations provide a connected view of the system from upstream processes to downstream coastal impacts. And then from a data perspective, the value lies in both the combination of high revisit imagery and high resolution imagery that Satellogic provides. It's directly aligned with CSDA missions, so this can leverage the integration of commercial and public Earth observation capabilities to provide analysis on these kind of events. So next, I will pass to my colleague Taylor, who will walk through another example of how researchers can use Satellogic data.
Awesome. Thanks, Emma. Hey, everybody. My name is Taylor Struzik, and I'm the U.S. Government Account Manager for Satellogic. I work closely with NASA to get access to our data and products, not only for the CSDA program, but some other work that we're doing together as well. A little background about me. I spent the majority of my career in the U.S. intelligence community, supporting various programs, and now I work with Satellogic, pretty much bringing that experience and trying to really push our imagery more into the forte of U.S. government defense intel work and those in the commercial sector. So very nice to be here and talk through some examples that we have that you can use with our imagery. Following up on Emma's discussion on Satellogic imagery, the example that we're going to be examining here is the developments at Endacima Gold Mine in the Central African Republic in Africa. Through the lens of Satellogic's high-frequency satellite imagery and its exploitation by foreign influence. This imagery being derived from imagery that we collected in May 2025 and February of 2026. This first slide gives you an overview from the 12th of May of 2025, essentially giving us a baseline for the continued expansion that's taking place at Endacima. You can see open pit mining areas highlighted in yellow, as well as processing centers that are highlighted in green, or outlined in yellow and outlined in green. From an environmental standpoint, which is what we're trying to focus this example on, this image reveals the deforestation footprint that continues to take place here, as well as the red dirt scars in the jungle that indicate where the canopy was first cleared for hauling roads, that being utilized for moving ore and other processed materials that are being essentially gouged from the earth in this location to be moved out and transported out of the country. The proximity of these pits to local water drainage systems also raises a lot of red flags for downstream sediment contamination that could be taking place as well. We can move to the next slide. So the second slide here is sort of an industrial expansion and toxic footprint, this being from February 5th of 2026, roughly a little over a month ago. So if we move to this date, the data shows a massive leap in technical capability and environmental risk. We've identified 3 critical developments that are taking place here that are essentially highlighted in the imagery as well with annotations. The first being the tailings storage ponds that are essentially being expanded from what we saw from last year. You can notice the newly constructed ponds outlined in blue. There are roughly 3 new ones that were created, as well as off to the left there outlined in yellow. There's some expansion that's underway, which you could assess is likely going to be some more tailing ponds that are going to be developed for everything that's going through with the ore processing and everything alike with that. The second sort of risk that we saw is the water pollution risks. Again, these ponds are massive toxic reservoirs. Any breach or unlined seepage directly threatens the local groundwater and the rivers that nearby communities rely on for drinking and fishing, especially with this being very remote. The ability for fresh water to be untainted really becomes a risk here with the amount of industrialization that's taking place with little to no guidelines or industrial limits to how things are supposed to be run. And the third, risk here being the active processing lines that you can see outlined over in yellow as well as in red. There's rock crushers and processing lines that are, very much active with the ore that is being processed, the rocks being crushed, and everything alike that's going to be essentially taken out of here and moved out of country. A lot of it, going through for processing for gold and other things like with that. But, the sheer volume of waste rock being generated is, permanently altering the local topography, leading to long-term land degradation that will make the area unsuitable for agricultural uses, for the years to come. And if we can move to the third slide. So from here, we're looking at more of a comparative pit growth and ecosystem loss. So on the left-hand side, you can see the imagery that we had from May 12th of 2025 compared to imagery that we had from February 5th of 2026. As you can see, it's expanding in terms of the pit expansions, as well as new roads that are being developed and actual construction equipment that we've noticed through an excavator that's there doing actual clearing processes that are taking place. So, the ability for us to catch an excavator in the act is quite, great that you can actually see this through the lens of satellogic imagery, and especially when it comes to our high cadence revisits, where you can actually monitor this almost in real time, especially with the amount of collection that we have been able to get over this site. You can actually monitor this and see it, especially from a denied area result, and being able to assess what are the likelihoods of things continuing here, how much is the expansion going to take place. So again, another way that this imagery can be utilized not only for defense and intel users, but also for the scientific community that's wanting to understand how is the land changing, especially on the continent of Africa. And so this being leading sort of to our key summary here, since this is just sort of a quick overview of how you can use our imagery to see before, after, and during effects. In summary, Satellogic's persistent monitoring has proven that this is no longer a localized mine. It's very much an industrial scaled environmental event. The rapid buildup of processing infrastructure and tailing ponds indicates that the priority is maximum extraction speed, with little to no regard for the long-term ecological or human health of the region. We have many more examples that, we're examining through our imagery and pushing out on social media to showcase not only a story, but also showcasing, how our imagery can provide these insights that are valuable for multiple communities of interest. So with that, that's my piece, and thank you for coming in the time.
Thanks, Taylor. And I will wrap us up if we go to the next slide with how you can contact the Satellogic team. So if you're interested in working with Satellogic data or have questions or you're not already accessing our data through the CSDA program, you can talk to our wonderful team to continue the conversation. We're here to support any discussions around available data sets, scientific or application-focused use cases, or different access pathways based on your needs. Our goal is to ensure that the data can be effectively integrated into your workflows, whether that be for research, validation, or operational applications. So what you can do is you can scan the QR code here below, or you can go ahead through the link in the chat to reach out to our team. And of course, for those that are already engaged through CSDA, we're always open to expanding collaboration and exploring additional use cases, especially given our newest Constellation additions. So please reach out to our team. We're always here to help. And we thank you so much for your time today.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Emma. At this point, we are going to transition over to the Q&A period. But first, let me open up the final optional polling questions. Get this going. All right, everybody. So we did have quite a few questions that have been asked, and I will try to, tackle the ones that are commonly asked in the chat as well as those in the Q&A. So let's get started here. So I think the first question was asked, and that was what is the resolution of the terrain model being, was responded to rather, the terrain model being used in your ortho rectification, and I believe I saw a response 30 meters. So that question has already been resolved. But let's move on to your second question here. What are the technical specifications of Satellogic's full motion video capability including resolution, frame rate, duration, and footprint. Does the existing API support querying and downloading FMV data? And if you need to repeat any of that, let me know.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so in the CSDA, say menu of things you can get from Satellogic, full motion video is not one of the products in there. We are working with various partners to bring the full motion capability to the market. So I would say today we're not offering it as a full-fledged product, but if you have something interesting you want to try and bring to a tactical customer, it's probably best suited for that kind of project-based work.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mark. I am going to hop to the next question here. Let's see. Do you have any? Excuse me. Let me see here. Thanks for monitoring the WHM of your new sat fleet. Are you aware that for Mark IV, WHM is approximately equal to pixel and BGR bands, which are sharp, greater than 2 pixels in near infrared band, which is blurred? Okay, so I guess there's a comment first. For Mark V, all bands have WHM, which is approximately equal to 3 pixels, which are severely blurred. What happened to the Mark V satellites? And this is a question from Gary Lynn at NASA.
Hi, Gary. I will take this. I think we already talked about this in BH Roda last year in Italy. We have our presentation during BH Roda that we can share here in the chat for the rest of the participants. What we were doing during the last year was to work hardly on the calibration part of the sharpness of our Mark fleet constellation. And we found some issues in the calibration that were solved. So now we changed to a different kind of approach in the monitoring the sharpness. So instead of just only check will we have maximum of each capture at the end, what we are doing is to monitor all the contributions to our sharpness budget and then correct, if necessary, during the whole lifetime of our satellites, the quality and the sharpness of the images we deliver. And the reason why we are asking for a reevaluation of our imagery right now from NASA is because we improved during the last year, especially this was affecting Mark V fleet. So that's the reason why we are pushing that reevaluation. So as a first preliminary improvement to see the results, you can check the view for the presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Mariella. Really appreciate all of that insight and follow-up. Moving on to the next question here. There are actually 2 parts, 2 separate questions. The first is, and this is from the chat, do you foresee any problems in the supply chain for building Satellogic satellites due to restrictions on rare metals or supplies coming through the Strait of Hormuz? And then the second question is, and maybe these are questions that you want to follow up with this individual offline. Is the cash available at this moment sufficient for the development of Merlin, or do you foresee future new share issuances? So again, the part 1 is, do you foresee any problems in the supply chain for building Satellogic satellites due to restrictions on rare metals or supplies coming through the Strait of Hormuz?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a concrete answer for you there. I would say no, I'm not seeing any supply chain issues, but I probably would be too early to tell, to be honest, because it just started. So, but yeah, at this point, there's no issues. And I think there's another follow-up question about cash to build the constellation. So the Merlin constellation relates back to an award that we announced publicly in April of 2025, where that's where the cash came from. So it's a $30 million program to build the constellation. So no, we don't need more cash.
All right, perfect. Thanks so much, Mark. Thanks for the follow-up. Right here. So let's see. The next question is, I was just making sure I know that I could see that Dana has responded to one. Do any RDF corrections to the data? Also, what is the absolute radiometric accuracy?
Okay, we actually do BRDF corrections just for the case of when we are comparing in the vicarious calibration with the Sentinel, not in all the images we deliver. And regarding the absolute radiometric accuracy, we are below 10%. We absolutely calibrate our system to be with an uncertainty below 10% in absolute value. What we do is just after the launch to compare with the vicarious calibration, our radiometric accuracy with Sentinel-2, but that is just a control comparison. It's not the absolute value that is taken care by the absolute calibrations we do in the lab with the corrections afterwards, pixel to pixel, with the gray under frame that Alan mentioned during the presentation.
Okay, well, thank you very much again, Mariella. And so the next question here is I could have missed this, but could you explain the new surface reflectance level 2A product? Can we use them for NASA CSDA evaluation?
So I was just introducing, and please help me here, Dana and Mark, but I was just introducing that we are on the engineering side developing a surface reflections product that is still in beta. If you get into our developer center, you'll get all the insights about how far developed it is and the preliminary results we got, which are really encouraging, but I'm afraid they're currently not part of the current contract. But that's something that probably we should discuss once the product is available so that we make sure that it reaches the hands of the people wanting to use them.
Okay, thank you so much, Alan. There was a question asked earlier, and part of the question Dana responded to, but one part of the question was regarding how does one obtain access to the Aleph data access platform?
Yeah, let me take that. So the Aleph platform is certainly available for users who want to subscribe. I think the primary sort of mechanism for NASA CSDA users to access the data is the satellite data platform. So that's probably the best answer, and maybe Dana can comment on that. We didn't show a demo of our platform in the event today just because of time, but it's got access to our archive, access for tasking, managing your orders, and all the typical stuff that you'd expect from an imagery access platform. One of the things that we're bringing to market, and we just announced recently, is a Aleph Observer program, which is a analytics portion of the platform. So that allows you to set up new sites that you want to monitor routinely, get analytics generated and delivered with the products in the same latency that we offer for the imagery. That's also not yet part of the CSDA menu, mostly because we just announced it recently, and we will be working to onboard those new products during this year, I hope.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Mark. There was a question asked a few minutes ago, and it is that digital elevation model available out of the USA?
I would say as generated by Satellogic, no. We that's not been our focus so far.
Okay. And so what I'm trying to do is make sure that I have captured the questions both in the chat as well as in the Q&A. So for all participants, if you see me kind of jumping from one to the other and your question is not in the Q&A, that is why. Okay, the next question. When might Merlin be operational and showing up on the Aleph platform?
Yes, so we're anticipating a launch in Q4 for the first of 3 launches. And so our current plan is to launch 1 in the first launch and then move on to 3 in the next, and the last 4 in the summer of 2027. So you should expect to start to see imagery in Q1 of 2027. and then the capacity of the constellation will scale up as the rest of the satellites get on orbit, get commissioned. And indeed, as you ask, today we have like a stack-based catalog archive API. All this data is going to go into that same kind of infrastructure. And so if you're already plugged into our platforms, you will be able to see Merlin data. And then it's really just about a commercial aspect needs to be handled to get you access to the data.
Okay, excellent. I see a couple more questions. One was also entered into the Q&A. So let me go to this next question. Which specific algorithm is used for atmospheric correction?
Thanks, Jennifer. I was about to answer that in the Q&A section. So we use 6S algorithm. All details are in the developer side, so I left all detailed information there. I take the chance to also mention that we've been requested to write our ATVDs frequently by specifically NASA investigators, and we are doing that. And I expect to have them soon publicly released on our developer side. So stay tuned. We'll probably get in touch with you, with the program managers, to let you know that is in place, that we are already writing every detail of the ATVDs for each processing level that we are currently delivering.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Alan. Sorry I missed that you posted a link to the documentation, and thanks so much for doing that. And just as a reminder to all participants, you can find dataset documentation for Satellogic at their developers.satellogic.com URL, which we can post in the chat again for everybody. I'm still in the Q&A, and the next question is, I don't think anyone has responded yet. Who would be a good partner for agricultural monitoring, like crop health, groundwater levels, pest infestations, etc.?
I think the answer to that is it kind of depends on where you are, like what part of the world you're from. We tend to work with local partners who take our data and do value-added analytics on top, especially around agriculture. So if you were in the US, then I was just checking if somebody replied to that. But yeah, you can just reach out to us and we can have a chat about that.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks so much, Mark. We have only a couple of 3 minutes left in the extended Q&A period. So I'm doing another scan of the chat. I do not think I have missed anything. Let me hop back onto the Q&A, make sure I've not missed anything there either. As I am doing that, I just want to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. Again, just as a reminder, it will take a few days for the recording to be made available on the NASA Earth YouTube channel. But once it is, if, for example, you have any colleagues who registered but were unable to attend today, I will send an email to both registrants and attendees that includes links to the recording as well as the presentation slide decks used within today's event. Okay. They can certainly, take another look at your leisure. Normally what I'll also do is I will add some chapters to the recording so that you can hop directly to a specific point in the presentation if you had a question about any of the vendors' presentation elements or, section. I don't see anything that I have missed. I don't see anything that I've missed in the Q&A, but there was a follow-up from the user who asked about, who do you recommend we partner with? And he said he's in the U.S. Midwest Great Lakes region. If there are any suggestions from anybody. If there are no further questions, what we're going to do at this point, we've got 1 minute left. We are going to log off from the audio component, but I will leave the virtual meeting space open an additional 10 minutes. So if any of you think of a question, please feel free to type that into the chat or the Q&A. I will share the questions with our speakers So they can certainly follow up with you offline if you would like. And with that, just doing one quick scan. I don't see anything new. I'd like to thank all of our speakers this afternoon from Satellogic and also Dana Ostrenga from the CSDA program and my backup host, Joseph Smith, for all of the inputs and the presentation content this afternoon. And most importantly, thanks to all of you for your extremely thoughtful questions and feedback on the data. It's really valuable to have that information. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to participate this afternoon. So thanks so much to all of you. Any final remarks from any of our speakers? And if not, we're going to go ahead and log off from the audio, but we'll leave the virtual meeting space open.
Thank you very much, Jennifer and Dana and everyone.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are listening in from. All right. Care now. All right. Goodbye, everybody.